Vault Gear Modifiers. There's plenty of Vault Gear Modifiers in Vault Hunters, and we need to look at what they are, how you get them, and which ones are the best. So whether you're looking for weapons, wands, or wellies, that may have taken a lot more than one take, then you'll know exactly how to get them and what to kit them out with. We also have a forge in the shape of a panda, so if that's not worth sticking around for, I don't know what is. So let's start with the absolute basics. How do you craft Vault Gear? Most of you will know this, but you need a Vault Forge, and in here you will use an assortment of items in order to create all of the weapons and armor in the game, and you just need to click one of them, set what level you want to craft it at, click craft, and you will then be able to get an unidentified vault piece, roll it, and you will get a new bit of Vault Gear. You can also get Vault Gear in ornate chests in the vault, as well as completion crates, but more on that later. When you roll a piece of Vault Gear, you're going to get it in one of 5 rarities, those being Scrappy, Common, Rare, Epic, and Omega. Now the only difference between these is the amount of modifiers that you can get. So if we have a look at the Scrappy one, you'll see it only has 2 modifiers, knockback resistance, and mana regen. Now as we go up, you'll see we get 3, then 4, then 5, and then 6 modifiers on the Omega, which means that even if the actual modifiers are not quite as good on the Omega, having more of them makes the Omega much more valuable than having the Scrappy. And this translates across to your weapons as well. The better the weapon, the more modifiers you're going to get. Now, of course, having 6 bad modifiers is not as good as having 1 fantastic modifier. So that is where our next station comes in, and that is our Artisan Station. Now this station is used to reroll the modifiers that you have on your existing Vault Gear. You're going to need these items called focuses. Foci? Focuses. And you will get these as you run through the vault, or at least you'll get most of them as you're running through the vault. Certain ones, such as the faceted focus, I got in a slightly different way, which we will cover later on. Now when you put a piece of vault armor in here, it's going to use vault plating and vault bronze, which you get from the vault itself, in order to change the modifiers on it. So for example, if we go and use a wild focus which re-rolls all prefixes and suffixes, it will change everything that is on the prefixes and suffixes section, and that will just keep changing every time you re-roll it, but it will use something called crafting potential. Now crafting potential is basically how easy your armor is to modify. As you can see, if we want to use a wild focus, we need 4 plating, 13 bronze and 1 wild focus, but if we start changing this, over time, that is going to increase. And if you keep doing it, it's going to get more and more expensive as your crafting potential decreases. This basically stops you re-rolling gear forever, and eventually you're going to just have to accept what modifiers you've got on there, or you're going to run out of all of your plating and bronze. Now while you're re-rolling this, you'll see the prefixes and suffixes change, but the implicits, which is your durability, armor, and ability power on this one, won't actually change. There is a special type of focus called a fundamental focus that will allow you to change those implicits. However, these are a lot later game and a little bit rarer to get. That means that for at least your early game, you're going to be wanting to look for items that have really good implicits, because the rest is a little bit more malleable. Now, item rarity is not the only thing that you roll when you roll Vault Gear. When you get a specific piece of Vault Gear, you will actually get an equipment tier, and that will be what your level is when you run the vault, if you get it from a vault, or it'll be whatever level you set it at when you craft it yourself. So in this case, you'll start out with level 0, and then it can go up to level 10, 20, 30, 40, and so on. It can be between the thresholds, it can be like level 96, for example, but I've just made these to make it nice and easy. Now the difference is, the modifiers themselves get more powerful as you go up the tiers. So for example, at level 0, the maximum armor you can roll is 5, and the minimum is 3. But if we look at level 100, the minimum you can roll is 17, and the maximum is 30. And then yours will be somewhere within there. It can be further broken down into the actual tiers themselves, like this is a tier 9, but honestly, you don't really need to worry about that in the slightest. All you need to be worrying about is how good the modifier is within the tier of armor that you can actually get. For example, if you're level 20 and you roll a piece of armor like this one that is 7 armor, that is the maximum roll that you can get, which means that this is a good armor piece. However, if you're at level 60 and you have got 14 armor on your chestplate, if you click shift, you will see that the range is 14 to 16, so this is actually a minimum roll and not very good for a level 60. As you get further through the game, the modifiers get more and more powerful. You can get things like plus 100% mana at level 100, where you could only get up to, say, maximum of plus 20% at level 0. Now that brings us on to the world of implicits. Now, what we looked at is one that had durability, armor, and ability power. However, they're not the only implicits that you can get on a chestplate. For example, when you roll it at a higher level, in this case level 20, you can actually get critical hit resistance instead of ability power. So you won't gain any ability power at all from this piece of armor, but you will also get additional critical hit resistance, making you a little bit more tanky. Now on a chestplate you can get ability power, critical hit resistance, mana, or block chance, and you need to be picking the ones that are right for your build. If you're running a build with a lot of fireball like I am on my single player Let's Play world, then you will see that you need a bunch of ability power, so you should always be picking the ability power ones. However, if you're running a physical damage build which requires a lot of mana, for example on Rampage, you might want to be running a pure mana build and maxing out that mana as much as possible. Finding armor with the correct implicits is very, very important. If you're running a mana build and you actually don't use that much mana, well, that's just a wasted armor piece. But if you maximize things correctly, you can become very powerful very, very quickly. And if you do get a bunch of armor with the wrong implicits and you don't have fundamental focuses, you can just put it inside a Vault Recycler. And what that's going to do is it's going to give you some Vault Scrap, which you can then use to make Vaulterite ingots, which you can then use to craft more Vault Gear. That's also how you get your faceted focuses. I told you we'd come back to it. If you start putting a bunch of armor into the Vault Recycler, you will get a faceted focus with one of those modifiers on. So then you can just pull it out and apply that nether damage to a different piece of armor in the Artisan Station. Now, it is completely random which one you get. However, it is going to be one of the modifiers that are on the gear pieces that you've dismantled. So after you've made your backup set of armor, make sure you're dismantling the others with the modifiers that you actually want to keep. Seems a bit counterintuitive, but think about it as transferring it onto armor pieces that you actually need that have much better implicits. Now, different pieces of Vault Gear can have different implicits. We've already gone through the ones for the chestplate, but the helmets can have the ability power, critical hit resistance, and lucky hit chance. The leggings can have ability power, critical hit resistance, and mana. You can see the pattern that's emerging here. And the boots can have ability power, critical hit resistance, and movement speed, which can be very, very fun if you stack this pretty high. Now, your other items are pretty limited. Your shields can have block chance or thorns damage, one or the other. They can never have both. And the others all have static modifiers, so your weapons always have durability, attack speed, and attack damage. Your magnets always have range, durability, and velocity. Your Vault Idols always have mana, durability, and affinity for whichever god the idol is for. And the wand always has ability power and durability. And as you can see, all of them can have soulbound, which basically keeps this item for free if you were to die in the vault. Soulbound can be pretty much rolled whenever, and it's a very good modifier to have because it saves you a lot in death costs. But I wouldn't go out of your way to try and roll it. It'll just happen when it happens. Now that brings us on to the lovely world of prefixes and suffixes. and I have rolled pretty much every prefix and suffix that you can possibly get in Vault Hunters, just so that you can see what you can actually get. Now, something to realise is there's not really a difference between prefixes and suffixes. Well, technically, some things can only roll as prefixes, and some things can only roll as suffixes, but they basically work identical. You just need to know which thing goes where. So let's start with the weapons, and you've got some really good prefixes here. Now, the one that is arguably the best for pretty much everything is going to be attack damage. Now, attack damage is just going to flat out increase the attack damage that you do, so every hit is going to be stronger. It can get very, very powerful. Now, you also have chaining, which is also very, very powerful because it will attack additional targets for basically half damage when you attack a main target, as long as they're within a reasonable distance. Now, these two are mutually exclusive, so you can't get attack damage and also get chaining, so you need to have one or the other. Now, 4 of the other modifiers affect specific creatures. So Undead will do extra damage to Undead, including Vault Fighters. You've got your Nether damage for when you get a little bit later on and start dealing with a lot of Nether creatures. Arthropods will deal with those annoying spiders much, much better. And Illager damage is also very good for things like your challenge rooms, where you tend to have things like Pillagers and your Vindicators that will hit you very, very hard. The final one is Soul Chance, and this can be rolled on multiple things and they'll all stack up, but it will give you more soul shards in order to gamble with later in the game. They're honestly pretty straightforward. I would recommend on that one getting your attack damage and then potentially some soul shard chance in the early game, and then that Nether damage and Undead damage is going to come in super useful later game when you're not one-shotting everything. If we now look at the suffixes, things get a little bit more wild. Most of these actually change the way that you will use the item. So some of the basic ones are like durability, not going to do much for you. Attack speed, again, not going to do much. Attack range, again, not hugely changing. However, once you get things like Healing Cloud, you're going to want to be playing a bit more aggressive because your attacks are actually going to proc healing for you. So you turn into a bit like a raging barbarian, basically. On the other hand, you've got Poison Cloud, where sometimes you might want to hit things and then run away, or you want to build a build around poison damage specifically if you've got Poison Cloud. The same can be said for things like Chilling Cloud. There are builds that focus around chilling mobs and putting freezes on them. Things like Frozen Impact and Frostbite can be used to great effect if you have a Frost Cloud sword, and it's going to be super, super good if you stack these really highly. And then you have your general utility, like your Fear and Slowness Clouds, which are going to be able to keep you alive much more effectively. Now, you also have 3 swords, which kind of feel a little bit RNG focused. So those are your Lucky Hit Chance. For those of you that don't know, you can access Lucky Hits once you hit level 25, and you can build some really powerful things around them. Lucky Hits can do a variety of things, including doing extra damage, stealing some mana, stealing life, and attacking more mobs, and this can be increased the chance of getting a lucky hit by the armor that you have on, as well as the suffixes on your weapons. So if you have a really high lucky hit chance, you might actually be able to have full mana all the time. You also have Stun Attack Chance, which again there's a build around, and you have Shocking Hit Chance. These are basically going to disable mobs for a little while you're in the vault, going to help with your survivability. And the final one is Sweeping Hit Chance. That is kind of similar to Chaining, where you can just hit one mob, but it will also hit additional mobs that are within your attack range. Now, these suffixes are a little bit interesting because it's not like your normal tier list that we could make where I can tell you, you know what, you should always be going for Shocking Chance or you should always be going for Fear Cloud or anything like that, because it really depends on your playstyle and what you want to achieve. Now, I'm a huge advocate for the Healing Cloud because it's just going to save you a load of mana from using heal, and I also love Sweeping Hit Chance just purely because you can get that extra bit of damage to mobs that are nearby, and it just feels really cool. Now, you really can't go wrong with these too much, but I would recommend probably staying away from durability. You don't really need it. I would re-roll it if you have that as your only modifier. Now, weapons are really, really simple, But armor is a little bit more complicated. There's a lot to cover in armor. Now, your armor really defines your build, much more than your weapons do. Your weapons just hit things, but your armor is where you're going to get all of your really good modifiers. So if we have a look, I split these ones into more defensive side of things, more offensive side of things, and some more utility. So the ones that you can get on these pieces of armor, you can get just extra armor. The more armor you've got, the less damage you take. That's always great. You get knockback resistance, which is pretty F tier. Not great knockback resistance, if I'm honest with you. You get extra health. Health is always fantastic. And you get resistance, which is just a flat damage decrease. This is huge. If you stack resistance high, you're basically not going to be taking any damage. Really good modifier and massively underrated. Now, your offensive ones are just an increase to attack damage or an increase to ability power. Now remember that some abilities use ability power, and you can always tell what they are because their damage will be in purple, and some use attack power, which is going to be in red. As we covered before, the attack damage on Fireball scales with ability power, whereas something like your Rampage is going to be covered by your normal red physical damage. So make sure you're matching physical damage to physical abilities, and you're doing your ability power to abilities. And now your utility ones, you get durability, which is not great but not terrible. You get additional mana percentage. This is max mana. Very good. I love this. The more mana you've got, the more flexibility you have. But then again, I am using a very mana intensive build. And then finally, the little bit of an interesting one is that you have plus levels to specific abilities. Now, I've rolled this chest plate and it has +1 level to Totem of Hatred. If we go over to Totem of Hatred, we can see that it will actually last for 42.5 seconds and a radius of 17. However, if we then go and put the chest plate on, it will now say 1+1, so 1 point we've invested +1 from the chest plate, and this is actually increased now, so we get 45-second duration and a radius of 18. So you are able to scale these without spending skill points on them. But that is not the best part. The best part is when you max out the skill. Now, as you can see, we have a 60-second duration and a radius of 24, and there is nowhere more for this to go. You have absolutely maxed it out. Until you put the chest plate on, in which case you actually over level it and you now have a 24 radius and 62.5 seconds. So you can get basically extra levels on top of the max level, which is incredibly useful for things like Fireball. The theoretical maximum for this is +9 levels if you get +4 from your chest plate and your leggings, and you also get +1 from your wand. But the only way that you can do that is if you get a thing called legendary modifiers. These are much more powerful modifiers, and you can only get them from loot inside the vault. Now, you're going to know you get a legendary modifier when you see this lovely twinkling modifier on your armor, and this actually rolls at 2 tiers above what the theoretical maximum is. So on a level 0 chest plate, normally you can only get +3 health. However, once you get to tier 3, you can get +6, and that is what this will roll on, so it will exceed the theoretical maximum for anything that you roll yourself. This basically incentivizes you to go and finish some vaults. But yes, your modifiers are super powerful on your armor, very worth investing into. Now we get onto armor suffixes. Honestly, these are not that exciting. They're all basically passive effects. So your increased area of effect just gives you a more powerful fireball, essentially. Item quantity is great because that gives you more items. Item rarity is not quite as good as you think it is. I'd recommend quantity over rarity any day. Then you have healing efficiency, allows you to heal more. Trap disarm chance is actually really good. If you can get this to +100%, you'll actually just get more loot because you won't lose it to traps. You also have soul chance, which we've seen before. Cooldown reduction, very good if you're using a mana or AP build. The mana regen, again, one of the best, if not the best modifier that you can get on any piece of armor, especially for ability-based builds. And then finally, you have poison avoidance, which is really good for mitigating poison traps, but you might as well be using things like trap disarm chance if you're wanting to do that anyway. but it can be useful against some mobs such as slimes. There is also things like wither avoidance and slowness avoidance in the game, but they are unrollable. I honestly don't know how you'd go about getting them. They're listed as unrollable. I couldn't find them even when looting like 1,000 vaults, but there you go. That's there. Maybe it'll be activated at some point, but I couldn't find a way to replicate it. And then you have your offhands, which are actually super powerful. These are really, really, really good. So your shields are hugely defensive orientated. You've got health, thorns damage, block chance, resistance, and soul chance. I guess soul chance not really defensive, but then you've got your usual durability, knockback resistance, lucky hit chance, and then you've got 3 clouds, your chilling cloud, your healing cloud, and your slowness cloud, but these are defensive based ones. They apply when you get hit, not when you hit enemies. So these are really, really good defensive options. And then the exact opposite of that is your idols, which don't offer you any protection at all, but they give you increased offensive options. So you're looking at things like mana regen, again, fantastic. Durability, usual thing. Lucky hit chance again. Healing efficiency, soul chance, trap disarm chance. All of these you'll all recognize. But then you get things like the avoidance for poison, slowness, mining fatigue, weakness, wither, and time acceleration. That comes in useful later on once you start dealing with the void liquid, which can just delete your time in the vault. It's quite scary when it's happening. But these are seen as a more offensive option, and they were your best option before wands were introduced. But now we do have wands, so you have even more offensive options such as your increased ability power, your additional levels, your usual stuff like durability, soul chance, all of that sort of good stuff, and all of these clouds and healing efficiencies and all of the stuff that you have seen before. All really good options for you to use. And the magnets don't just do what you'd expect them to do, because you'd obviously expect them to have range and velocity. Those are pretty obvious. However, would you expect them to have things like mining speed or reach? There's some interesting stuff you can do with the magnets, and if you stack a bunch of these together with a mega magnets, they get really, really good. Copiously is one of my favorites because it allows you to have the chance to potentially duplicate the ores that you get. And then you have more trap disarm chance. I'm telling you, trap disarm chance when you put it on a load of armor and you put it on your pickaxes and things like that, really, really good. Definitely worth getting. So those are all of the modifiers, but there is one last thing that you need to be aware of, and that is a lovely tool station that we have. That is called the Modifier Workbench. Now, when we go into it, you can put an item in here that has an empty prefix or suffix, and then you can use Vault Gold and the focuses in order to add a specific modifier onto the armor that you want. So, for example, if we wanted to put mana regen on here, we could just click this. If we've got the right stuff on here, then we could just click the mana regen and go craft, and it will add mana regen guaranteed on there, somewhere in the range that it said, which was 21 to 30. We got 29, a pretty good roll. Now, you can only have one crafted modifier on any piece of armor, and if you want to get rid of it, there is an option in the workbench to be able to do that. And be aware it uses one of the slots, it's not in addition to the slots, so make sure that you have a slot open that you want. So that is it. That is Hellfire's guide to weapons and armor modifiers. Very simple when you actually understand them, but I've had a bunch of you ask for this guide because it's been a bit confusing and you don't know how to optimize your gear or what to put on what, so hopefully this has helped you clear it up. If you have enjoyed the video and found it useful, make sure you subscribe down below to get more of these lovely guides. We'll be doing more and more Vault Hunters guides as time goes on. And if you want to support the channel, make sure you check out the channel memberships using the join button down below the video. It really helps the channel out, and you'll get a head start on some of the new awesome perks we're releasing, including some pretty cool artwork that we've commissioned. But we'll leave it there for now. Thanks very much for watching, everyone. I've been Hellfire Mage, and I will see you next time.